Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am so excited to be here with you this morning. We have not had a broadcast. We're actually doing this special edition ahead of our schedule. We are set to restart our regular broadcasting here in the coming weeks, but of course, something came up, and when something comes up, you have to address it, right? So I want to take this time to allow everyone to share this before we get started. I want you to go ahead and share this on your page, tag people, because this is really something that is dear to me and important for my community. And when I say my community, I mean my hometown community and our community overall, because it impacts economics, it impacts wealth. We always hear people speak about wealth gaps. And so go ahead and share this, share this information. Well, this broadcast, this is a special edition of Pretty Petty Politics. Give it a few minutes or a few more seconds for this to be shared. And I know it's early. It's super early, especially for me. I'm usually not in front of a camera this early. But let's just jump into it. So we are all aware of the treasonous actions, the insurrection that took place earlier this year on January 6th in our nation's capital of Washington, D.C. But it has been revealed that an heiress to George Jenkins, the founder of Publix, his daughter, Julie Jenkins Fancelli, she made a large donation in support of the insurrectionists. And because of her support, people are now calling for the boycott of public supermarkets. So that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about grocery stores, right? But it's really not about the grocery store itself. It's about the community that relies heavily on public supermarkets. And that community is the city of Lakeland, Florida, as well as many other cities around the country, especially where Publix is the dominating grocery chain. And this one is something that we're taking to heart. So we want to talk about why the demand for a boycott isn't the answer. So Until Freedom, an organization in which we typically support and agree with more times than not, has called for a boycott today. Today's February 1st, 2021. They've called for a boycott of Publix today. And we just vehemently disagree with that. And here's why. Publix is an employee-owned organization. 80% of the shares, so 80% of the company is employee-owned. 20% is owned by the heirs of the founding or the founder, George Jenkins. George Jenkins has been deceased for decades, but his children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, they're heirs, right? So he's created a legacy for his children, a financial legacy through this supermarket, right? Now, Julie Fancelli or Julie Jenkins Fancelli is not an employee of Publix. She's not an officer of Publix. She's not a spokesperson for Publix. She has no relation to any more relation to Publix than I do as a shareholder. I am a shareholder of Publix, and I have been my entire life. That was one of the first gifts my parents received. And then I also inherited, so I too am an heir of Publix. And I'm saying that kind of jokingly, but I'm also saying it very seriously, as are many people that I grew up with. They too are heirs to Publix, as are their children. I'm talking about people that look like me, Black people, right? And this is not just true to the city of Lakeland. This extends across the region in which Publix supermarkets exist. Publix is structured so that, again, employees own 80% of the company. In fact, they are the largest employee-owned organization in the country. And that's an important thing to note. So I can think of countless people, that parents have worked for this company. Their parents have taken those shares and have created legacies for their children. Parents have taken those shares and financed homes for their children, financed college tuition. They have created a way to, even if slightly, but definitely to close the wealth gap in their family by their participation in the shareholder program at Publix. Their shareholder program is incredible. I've seen the benefits myself. Again, I am a shareholder, and arguably, if we're and I too have inherited even additional shares. When my father passed many years ago, I won't say that because we kind of are mindful of privacy, but the point here is Julie Fancelli Jenkins is not an officer of the company. She is not on the board. She is, and I don't mean to say this to slight her or to slight anybody, but she is just the daughter. But the benefits of being anyone's daughter is what legacies our parents are leaving. So I'm not going to even really focus on her. I'm going to focus on my people who work for Publix, my people who celebrate, home ownership, celebrate that their child can go to college and come out debt free. Because that ain't my story, right? That's not a lot of people's story, but there are some people who have been positioned because they've worked for this corporation in many facets, whether it's management on the executive side, meaning like more corporate job, or if it's management on the industrial side of Publix. Now, most people don't know this about Publix. Publix is an entire corporation. They have their own production. They have their warehouses are massive. Publix is my family. I'm just go ahead and say it. This is coming from a very passionate place, and it's very important to me that we communicate this. And when I say that, is because our community has helped this company expand, and our community has been able to create wealth because of their connection to Publix. And I'm talking about Black wealth. Whatever that may look like for that person. I know people who were under the poverty line as children, literally under the poverty line, who worked for Publix as teenagers, worked for Publix and went to college part-time, and were able to utilize their shares as an employee, were able to even buy additional shares, were able to experience multiple splits of shares to increase that investment and that wealth. I know people who have been able to pass that along to their children. I know people that have been able to borrow against their shares through the Publix credit union to finance things and then pay that off and still maintain that wealth, those shares. So I think it's very important that we look at this through the scope of Blackness. Okay. But first, let me give this statement from Publix concerning this issue of of Julie Fancelli, or Julie Jenkins Fancelli. I don't want to act as though she's not the daughter of the founder, George Jenkins. Mrs. Fancelli, and this is from Publix. This is Publix's statement from Saturday, the 30th. Mrs. Fancelli is not an employee of Publix supermarkets and is neither involved in our business operations, nor does she represent the company in any way. We cannot comment on Mrs. Fancelli's actions. The violence at the Capitol on January 6th was a national tragedy. The deplorable actions that occurred that day do not represent the values, work, or opinions of public supermarkets. Now, I know a lot of times when we look at these companies, we just look at them from an E-suite perspective, an executive suite perspective. But I need you to look at it as truck drivers. I need you to look at it as plant supervisors, plant managers, directors. I need you to look at it as credit union executives. Publix does have a credit union. I need you to look at it from the perspective of Publix charities that gives millions of dollars to our communities. I'm telling you what I know, telling you what I have experienced. This is not just me having an opinion about something. This is passion this morning. This is purpose. This is facts. This is experience. Okay. So I just want to encourage us to look at this with from a different scope, okay, from a different purview, to understand that to call for a one-day, see, because I know how this works. People will say, we'll call for a one-day boycott, right? But what's the effectiveness of a one-day boycott, right, on something that's big? You know, this is a giant of a corporation. So I believe that there's some plotting for something bigger against the corporation. And I know that the people who will be hurt the most by such an action look like me. I'm just gonna say it. It is the truth. So it is very important that we utilize our actions with strategy. I understand the anger and the disgust of Julie Fancelli's support for the insurrectionists. I know she has a long history of embarrassing her family, the community which she grew up in, and has caused problems just because of her association to the company which her father founded that she has no legal ties to. She is a shareholder. She is a shareholder just like the employees of this corporation are shareholders. Right. And again, the family, the heirs of George Jenkins, own 20% of the company. The other 80% is employee owned. OK, is employee owned. It's early, so I didn't even stop to tap into people to have them come in and comment and join me on screen to talk about this. People who have worked for Publix or people who presently, who own shares of Publix stock. But I'm sure if you ask some of them, they would tell you like, no, this company really is doing great things for their employees and in the communities in which they're situated. So let's back up. Let's deal with this from another perspective. Legacies. Everybody has a name. Right? We all come from a family, a lineage, and we're all heirs to some things, right? And how we represent our names, how we represent those legacies, whether we're intentional or unintentional, what we do represents who we are connected to. So here's my charge to all of us. As we create our businesses and we create and grow our families, let us not forget to direct and pour into those companies and our families strong values. Every family has a red-headed stepchild, or what they call a black sheep. Families have those, right? And you can't control everything that someone does that is attached to you. Y'all feel me? You can't control everything that someone does that's attached to you, even if they're just attached by a thread. You can't control that. What you can do is make sure that your overall is taking care of the business, is taking care of the legacy, the purpose, and the mission of the thing, whether that's the family, whether that's the corporation. So again, this boycott that has been called for today against Publix, we at Pretty Petty Politics stand against it. We just stand against it. We stand against it because we understand the economic value to Black people who are employed by Publix, the economic value of those Black communities that benefit from Publix, the value that Publix brings to Lakeland, Florida, the value that Publix brings to Polk County, Florida, the value that Publix brings to Central Florida, the value that it brings to the Southeastern United States and all the locations throughout the country where they are positioned. So one thing that we can say about Publix, they did make a statement, right? But what do you expect a company to do about someone that they don't employ? Like, seriously. What do you expect them to do? That's a real question. She's not an employee. She's not on the board of directors. She's not a spokesperson. She's an heir. She's an heir. She's an heir to George Jenkins, who's long been deceased. She's not some 20-year-old heiress. You know, she's grown. She probably got grandchildren of her own, right? So to feed this with this media thing about the insurrectionists, I think that is a failure on our part. I think it's more important for us in the advocate and activist community to focus on Black wealth. All right. So maybe you didn't know Publix was 80% employee owned. Maybe there's a Publix in your community. Maybe someone in your family needs a job. You know, maybe they should, apply to Publix. And I'll give you an example. There's a couple I remember years ago, probably over 20 years ago. The husband worked for Publix and the wife worked in education, and they lived off one income. They did that for many years, and they would take the other income, and every time the option to buy shares was open, they would take that money that they saved from that other spouse's income, and they would purchase shares. And what they ended up doing was creating wealth and a legacy for their own family. They were able to purchase their home, right? They were able to do so many things because they were able to buy into these shares of this corporation. And they were able, once they start having children, they were able to pass a legacy to their children. A lot of companies, many of us don't have that option. There's no financial legacy created by being an educator. First of all, it's paycheck to paycheck almost for most educators. So to have that advantage, to be in a position to work for a corporation like that, that's a great opportunity. And there are other corporations like that. Here in Texas, we have HEB. HEB has a similar program, and they are heavily employee owned. I just think it's irresponsible for someone who is not attached to the corporate decisions, the corporate values, not an officer of a corporation, because they go out and act a plum fool, that those who are not in that lane have to take the brunt of that hit. I just think that just makes no sense to me. So again, I'm going to read Publix's statement on the matter. So before I do that, Julie Fancelli, or Julie Jenkins Fancelli, who is the daughter, one of the daughters of George Jenkins, the founder of Publix, who has been long deceased. Julie Fancelli has been a long radical ideologist, and she supports far right-wing ideals. It's nothing new. It comes up every so many years. She does something and it's like, there she go again, right? But this time she supported the insurrectionists. And by no means am I saying that's okay, because it's not. That's trash. That's pure trash, right? But here's Publix's statement on the matter. Mrs. Fancelli is not an employee of Publix supermarkets and is neither involved in our business operations, nor does she represent the company in any way. We cannot comment on Mrs. Fancelli's actions. The violence at the Capitol on January 6th was a national tragedy. The deplorable actions that occurred that day do not represent the values, the work, or opinions of public supermarkets. And if I may add an addendum to that, they do not represent the employees of public supermarkets, the shareholders and their families who are creating legacies and passing wealth and opportunities to their children, Black children, right? We got to stop looking at this in just one scope, like, and some Black folks that have been able to do some great things, not just for their families, but for their communities because of their positions at public supermarkets. And I'm going to wrap. I'm going to close on that note. So boycott has its purpose. And by no means do I say that boycotting anything is an antiquated action, because it's not. But in this case, we have to look at who is going to be harmed. Now, if it's just a one-day boycott and at closing time today, they move on, okay. But I've been around long enough to know that that's not always how these things work out. And so if this does persist for several days or weeks, the impact, the economic impact on people who look like me, who work for Publix, who have contracts with Publix, who drive trucks for Publix. Publix has its own fleet of trucks. They have their own dairy production. They have their own print shop. They produce so much, and so many of those people who work for that business look like me. I have worked for Publix. My sister has worked for Publix. My father, my cousins, my friends, my family, co-workers that I've worked with, even years after working at Publix credit union, they too have experience from Publix, and they too are shareholders, even though they're doing something totally different. They too have leaned on their shares to provide for themselves and their families in the time of need. That's the thing about being a shareholder. I mean, some people will sell shares, and sometimes you borrow against those shares just so that you can get ahead and then pay that back, and you still have your shares. That's incredible. And I know so many families that are creating wealth and legacies because of that program at Publix. So just be mindful. That's what I want to encourage you today, to be mindful. I still will shop at Publix, where shopping is a pleasure. I still will support my community, my hometown community. And I want you to know, Lakeland and Polk County, that I am praying that this too shall pass. And if you are an employee or your child is an employee of Publix, please talk to them about the shareholder program and to, make a sacrifice, maybe put away $50 of every check. So when the share options open, they can just take all of that savings that they've saved for during that time and buy shares. Because I'm telling you, as someone who has been a shareholder their entire life, it will be incredible for them. As someone who, as a little girl, would get so excited when her daddy would take her to People's Bank. People's Bank is no longer open. It was purchased by another bank. But when we would go to People's Bank in downtown, and he would show me how to sign the back of my dividend check. That's incredible. That's incredible. So I don't want to ignore the legacies that are created in that point. And in addition to that, this is an opportunity. Don't think I'm going to leave without giving Publix a charge. This is an opportunity for Publix to do more in our communities, to do more by creating stores, perhaps smaller stores in areas that do have food deserts. And I implore them to do that. We know that land is costly, and Publix is not one of those stores that will attach itself to like a whole bunch of other retail shops. There may be a few retails when you see a Publix, but they typically own the entire space. The parcel belongs to Publix. So I want to encourage Publix to create retail space in communities of color, particularly in the African-American communities throughout Florida, even if that's just the start in Polk County, to create that and create retail spaces so that Black businesses can have retail spaces and share those spaces. So Black insurance companies, Black bookshops, coffee shops, sandwich shops, just as we see all over, or doctor's offices, just as we see at, say, Oak Bridge or Plantation or Griffin Road, just to name a few locations of Publix throughout the city of Lakeland. Let's charge Publix with that, but let's not hold them accountable for the actions of Julie Fancelli. I just think that that is not that appropriate ask. There are some asks and demands that can be made, but I don't think them having to be responsible for the actions of Julie Fancelli is the answer. I think that this is an opportunity to let them to come to the table with Publix to discuss opportunities for communities of color that have food deserts. Publix is present in Alabama. There are places in the city of Birmingham. I know that Mayor Randall Woodfin would be more than happy to bring in grocery stores to different parts of Birmingham that have food deserts, that Publix could come in and create not just an opportunity or a place for people to shop, but also a place for people to work and start to create their own wealth, their own legacies, so that they too will have create a road to heirship for their children, so their children too can be heirs to Publix shares. All right, so that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning. Have a wonderful day. And before I go, one last thing. It is Black History Month. And this month, or this year, our theme is Black institutions and organizations. So pretty much each day, Monday through Friday, we will be posting a different institution or organization. So shortly here, you'll see information about Fisk University and Nashville, Tennessee. Because our focus is legacies and how our institutions and organizations create that. Have a wonderful day. Be blessed, and we'll see you next time.